Hi, my name is Travis Stewart, and here are my tips and tricks to make Iron Man truly invincible. Tip number 1, use missiles. Any problem you encounter in this game can be solved with missiles. Missiles destroy everything. If it's not destroyed, then you need to use another missile. This person thinks they're safe with their big old shield. Shoot them with a missile! See that guy over there? He needs a missile. Bam! He's gone. Tip number 2, use lasers. Lasers melt the freaking face off of your enemies. Use your Twizzler Ray of Death, max out their stun bar, and go in for that brutal killer blow. After that takedown, make sure you get your sweet reward of another heroic orb. Tired of turrets attacking you from on high? Turn the tables and decimate them all in seconds with your laser pointer of doom. Tip number 3. Do not use repulsors. Just look for yourself. The stats on these things are just mediocre. When you have missiles for high damage and lasers for stun, there just isn't any room for repulsors. Tip number 4, Hulk Buster healing. So you're in trouble and you want to throw on the Hulk Buster to completely annihilate your enemies in style? As a part of one of my favorite exploits for Iron Man, I have an alternative way for you to use the Hulk Buster armor. Check this out. Receiving damage as Iron Man isn't really that big of a deal as long as you can just cast Hulk Buster, instantly refilling your health bar. Now, one of the key things doing this is as soon as your Hulk Buster is loaded in, you can hit the left bumper to quickly exit the suit, and it saves about 90% of that meter. And then just picking up one heroic orb instantly recharges it, allowing you to cast another full bar of health on yourself. Tip number 5, bubble up. Out of energy like a roadkill Energizer bunny? Then you need to bubble up. Using Arc Overload gives temporary, unlimited ammo for all of your tools of destruction. Are you feeling like an overwhelmed teenager that just needs a safe space? Then just bubble up, and no AIM soldier can touch you. Tip number 6, smart and strong. Tony Stark, being the tech genius that he is, has no trouble hacking a computer. But did you know you could throw on the Hulk Buster and tear down a door too? Tip number 7, lasers for orbs. Never miss an opportunity to completely disintegrate your foes with a unibeam to turn them into fun candy-shaped orbs. And finally, here are the specs I used to build this Iron Man. So let's look at the options that I picked for Iron Man for his abilities that I think are the best. First, for Arc Overload, I picked the Arc Field specialization. I do this because it creates a protective bubble around you. Not only does it fill up your intrinsic meter so you have unlimited range attacks, but then this bubble will create a barrier which is often needed if you're trying to take over a point, or if you need a reprieve from the battle because you're taking too much damage. You can fly in the air, create this bubble, and it's really hard for enemies to enter because they'll take damage. But on top of that, they can't use any ranged attacks to try and get you inside your bubble, so you're protected during that time, while you can fire off lasers for stun or doing massive damage with your missile barrage attacks. The other option I use for arc overload is defensive field. Now, it requires arc field, which I just pointed out, but this will actually reflect incoming range attacks, missiles, blasters, things like that, giving you an extra protective layer against ranged enemies, and you're able to dish that damage back to them. So for Iron Man's Assault Heroic ability, I like to use the Omega Beam, and the reason for this is it does the largest amount of damage in a short amount of time. And then to pair with Omega Beam, I use Energy Condenser, which enemies defeated by Unibeam will drop heroic orbs, and this is important for the build I'm going for with Iron Man. For Iron Man's ultimate heroic ability, the Hulk Buster, I like to use Magno Missile Barrage because I like to use this ability at the very end of his timer, and I like to attack more targets doing the most amount of damage with this ability. Also with Iron Man's Hulkbuster, I like to use the Hyper Coils, which allows the Hulkbuster to be deployed for 10 more seconds than usual. Moving on to Iron Man's Mastery section, I like to use Stun Mastery, which increases all stun damage. This is important to get those all critical takedowns. And the reason those takedowns are so critical is because they spawn heroic orbs every time you do it. And finally, for the combat section, I like to use Weapon Efficiency Mastery. This reduces the cost of his intrinsic meter, which is to say all of his range attacks, his repulsors, his lasers, and his missiles. This is important because the way I play as Iron Man, I am constantly using his ranged attacks, so I want to limit the drain on his intrinsic meter as much as possible. Moving on to Iron Man's Mastery range section, I like to use Laser Mastery, which increases stun damage from all laser attacks by 20%. This is important because Iron Man's laser attacks is a key component to stunning enemies and getting those all-important takedowns for the heroic orbs. Next, I like to use Rocket Specialization. This adds targeting guidance system to the basic aim rockets. This is extremely useful so that you can use your rockets quickly and effectively without having to pinpoint targets, and it allows rockets to chase down enemies that are on the move. And finally, for range mastery, I like to use Laser Efficiency, which reduces the cost of laser attacks by 10%, so I can continue to do that sustained stun damage on an enemy. Moving on to Iron Man's intrinsic ability mastery tree, I like to use Arc Reactor Generator, which regenerates his intrinsic energy by an extra 10%. This allows me to get back in the fight with my ranged attacks. Moving on the intrinsic ability tree, I like to use Stun Intrinsic Boost, which gives you 25 points of intrinsic energy whenever you stun an enemy. The last ability in the intrinsic ability tree is Overcharge Heroic Boost, which increases your heroic meter's recharge rate while you are overcharged as Iron Man. This allows you to use your abilities more frequently as you maintain an overcharged state. Moving on to Iron Man's utility tree, I like to use Energize Pulse, which adds shock damage to the Energy Pulse ability. That ability is when you hit right trigger right before an enemy attacks you and you release a wave of energy, and this just adds shock damage to that ability. Next on Iron Man's utility tree, I like to use Reflective Barrier. This allows the energy barrier to reflect projectiles, helping Iron Man to stay safe when I'm trying to take over a position or just trying to retreat to cover. And finally, on the utility tree, I like to use Air Superiority, which increases Iron Man's ranged attacks by 15% while flying. Most of the time while I use Iron Man, he's in the air and flying, and taking out turrets with lasers quickly is key to using Iron Man effectively. And that's how I made my Iron Man invincible. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe to this channel, as new videos will be coming out every week. See you soon.